Welcome to the apex of sports ownership, the Apex Athletic Collective.
Welcome in everyone to episode 76 of Instigate Success, building an ABA franchise. I am your host here as always, Jake Schoen, aka Jakeymuffins, here for tonight's episode of the podcast. So this past week, a little bit abnormal, but we did not have a game, due to cancellation in the schedule, and there's not a game to review from this past week, but we will talk about the games coming up this weekend. We do have a double header this weekend, and look at the playoff picture and see how important these games are in that playoff picture. So on our schedule, it's a little bit different than what was originally scheduled. Let me pull up what we had on here originally. And well, before we jump the gun here, as always, thank you to all of our Patreon members. We've got over 125. I think we're around 130 something right now. And you guys will be able to watch those games live, all of the Patreon paid members. So we'll have one game tomorrow night, 7:30 tip against the Ohio Kings from our home venue, Best Choice Fieldhouse in Fishers, Indiana. And then we play against the Lions on Sunday. I have to double check though. I do believe they started their own Patreon as well. So they may be streaming that game over on their side. But let me pull up that schedule. So looking at what we had on the original schedule here, this past week that we just went through, we were originally supposed to be playing the Michigan Blaze. That team has folded, so we did not have a game this past weekend. That other game we had scheduled against the Blaze, we also did not play. Because those games were away games for us, they were home games for the Blaze. Neither one of those games are going to wind up counting as far as our schedule goes, as far as the record on the schedule goes. So basically, they just don't count, is how it works. I believe if they're home games for us and the opponent cancels, then we can petition that. And that's the case with the Monsters game that was canceled. We did wind up getting the victory awarded to us in that by forfeit. But because these two Michigan Blaze games were on the road for us, neither one of them will count towards our record or the on the schedule this season. So that's just a little bit of a clerical cleanup when it comes to that. But the last game we did play was against the defending champions and the current number one team, still undefeated, Chicago Fury. 10-point loss in that. It was our second time playing the Fury and the second time we've had a 10-point loss to the Fury. So we're definitely showing we're capable of sticking around with the guys at the top. And I think the Fury they'd have to be, as far as I'm aware of, the favorite to repeat this season when it comes to the championship odds. So if we're able to stick within 10 points of them, I feel pretty good about where we stand within the league. But ultimately, we will have to make that next step so that we can eventually get the victory against the Fury. They are in our division, so once it comes to playoff times, it will be, a team that we're going to have to beat in the playoffs because they are a division rival. But this week coming up, and that's what we've got tomorrow, is the first of the doubleheader this weekend. So this weekend we will actually have two games, one Saturday and one Sunday. Something we've been trying to do this season. It was something we had on the schedule a couple of times. This time it's actually going to happen though. And then we have another weekend where we have two games scheduled. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, if I'm being honest, because one of those games, looking at the calendar, is currently showing a Friday game. And I'm not sure that's super realistic for either us or the other team involved for that. But this weekend, we've got tomorrow night against the Ohio Kings, our only home game scheduled for the month of February. So we're already not yet, but we're close to the second month here in 2025. We'll wrap up our first month of the new year here, and we had a few games going on. Some good teams in there, but we started off the new year with that victory against the Nashville Aces, the number 9 ranked team at that point in time. And then we had a couple of cancellations, and then the game against the Fury. So as far as the month of January goes in 2025, not super busy. We had 2 games and what's that? Three cancellations. So definitely not the numbers we want going forward for each month. Definitely rather have more games than cancellations. And none of those were cancellations on our end. They were due to circumstances outside of our control. So hopefully we don't run into too many more issues like that in the future. But that gets me to the next point. So we've got the game against the Kings tomorrow. The other game we had scheduled for this weekend was supposed to be against the Pipples. The Pipples, as far as I'm aware, are not playing games any further this season. And because of that, we have a different game scheduled. This is a big game. We kind of teased this a week or two ago, but we're going to be playing the Indiana Lions at their home venue Sunday. I believe it's 4 p.m. Eastern. And that is a big game for us. That's not a team we had originally on the schedule for this season, but a team we played a few times last season. And, one of the teams I think a lot of us owners and fans have kind of compared ourselves to throughout this, process here in the first and second season of growing and establishing our team in the ABA. The Lions, they were last season in our division, and they were coming off of defending a co-championship, due to the circumstance with how the previous season ended. So we were able to play in the division with the defending champion last season, and this season we are again we're in a new division, but we're still in a division with the defending champions, being in the division with the Chicago Fury this season. The Lions, though, they've been a powerhouse team for at least the past few seasons that I've been keeping track of. And they are still a team this season high in the power rankings. They've played a lot of games so far, but they have a lot of victories, just a couple of losses on the record. And I think they're one of the highest teams with a loss as far as the ABA rankings go. But that's the big thing for this weekend. So 2 key games, 2 tough opponents, and actually both of these teams we have not secured a victory against. So it will be a tough matchup for us in both of those games. Obviously the Kings are a very prolific team on offense. We were able to limit their leading scorer last time below his season average with Cameron Mitchell. I believe he averages about 40 points a game. We held him in the around 30. It was in the 30s for sure, but it was under that 40-point mark. But we can pull that up here in just a little bit. But that is a very strong offensive dominated team, and defense is going to be key for us in that game. But the other thing is our offense from time to time has seen its struggles. We definitely are going to have our A game for that matchup against the Kings, as well as for the very next day against the Indiana Lions. I'm really excited about this weekend here because of that doubleheader. Last season when we were in the play-in tournament, that was one of the things. It was our first time going into that kind of circumstance where we had 2 games in the same weekend, essentially a back-to-back, where we played on Saturday and then we wound up playing on Sunday. And that's how the playoffs are structured most of the time here in the ABA. So if you're in that first round of playoffs, you got that game on Saturday. Then you have the game on Sunday if you're able to secure the victory and move on. And then if you're able to win on that game, then you'd roll into the next week. And normally it's the same exact situation where you got the game on Saturday, you win that, then you keep going on Sunday. And that keeps going like that pretty much the whole entire time for the playoffs in the ABA. We've got the division round, you got the play in, then you've got the division round, and then it jumps to the region, then from the region into the final four. Um, but that's why I'm really looking forward to that, because not only are we having the back to back, but we're playing two really really good teams that we've played a few times. We played them last season. They're not in our division this year, but we're familiar with them, and we know the type of games they're going to be bringing, and we're going to be looking for our first victory against both of these teams. It's also pretty crucial as far as the playoff seeding is going to go within our division with these two games as well. There's not much left here on the schedule. We've got these two games this weekend. Then next weekend, I believe we are off. It's Super Bowl weekend. The following weekend, though, we will have that game scheduled against the Monsters. That one is still on the schedule, and we anticipate playing that. Then we go on the road the following weekend. Again, this is the other one where we had the double header scheduled, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what we're going to have hammered out here, because that February 21st game on there is a Friday when we pulled up the calendar. So we'll have to get that one figured out. Because again, I don't anticipate either of our teams being able to play on a Friday, unless maybe like it's a real late night game or something along the lines of that. And then we've got the game against the Aces on Saturday. So that one I do anticipate having the road game against the Aces on Saturday the 22nd. The other game, though, there against the Kings, we'll have to get that one figured out. And once we do, we'll definitely make an announcement. And then we've got that final home game of the season scheduled for the 1st of March against the Maysville Miners. And that is what we've got left on the schedule. So really not too much left. And if you look at the records of the teams we've got coming up here, the Kings right now, I believe they've got a better record than us. Um, the Lions, they definitely have got a better record than us currently. The Monsters, we have the advantage on. The Kings, again, we were playing them. We already know that one. And then the Aces, we won against the Aces, but they do have the better record. The Miners would be the only other team on the remainder of the schedule. As far as record goes, we would have the advantage. Um, so yeah, yeah. So maybe always great to have Night J right here, and we're streaming over on Twitch again. For the podcast, but maybe we could have a midnight showdown on Friday night. That'd be pretty awesome. Maybe if we did something like that, we could stream that one to like simulcast with a pregame here on the podcast. Something like that would be pretty cool. But we'll definitely have to get that one figured out. I'm not sure, because a lot of us, including the players, we do have regular day jobs, so sometimes that Friday game might be a little difficult as far as the travel side goes, getting everyone there, or having enough guys to perform for that, not only for us but for the Kings as well. So we'll definitely get that one figured out, but that would be a pretty cool idea, and if that's something we're able to pull off, that'd be pretty cool, I think, to have kind of like a simulcast here with the podcast as a pregame, and then jump over to a live game broadcast directly after that. But maybe that is something we'll throw out on the table and see if we can pull off. But we definitely got a tough road here going in the final stretch of the season. Right now we are at 6-6, so we're at that 500 mark. Again, I think we had 20 games originally here on the schedule. That's still the number we would like to hit. Obviously, with the cancellations, maybe not going to be able to hit that number, but we want to come close to that. Last season, I think we hit 16, and that's the number that we were aiming to get a little higher, but I think that 16 is like the number, the mark for us to be playoff eligible as far as what's stated explicitly in the rules. So that's always the number we're going to have to hit at least, is that 16 mark. Obviously, there were some exceptions. I will note last season when it came to that 16 game mark, certain teams didn't hit that, but they were still allowed playoff eligibility. So there's always some leeway with that, but we'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to that. So we've got those games coming up here. We'll jump and show the power rankings, see what we're looking at right now within the ABA. And let's see, it looks like it's loading. Yeah, it looks like it should be up here now. Yep, so we've got the power rankings up. And you see there, Chicago Fury still at the top there, undefeated, number one team, 14-0. They are definitely, like I said, the favorites, I would say, for the championship right now. Buffalo Extreme, a team I always am watching, and I'm very high on as well. I think they are definitely right up there, and talent wise, I don't know. I think that would be a great matchup. I'd like to see at some point is the Buffalo Extreme and the Chicago Fury. Obviously it's difficult to pull off because of the different regions. Buffalo being over in the east, with the Fury over in the central. But those are two very very dominant teams so far this season. Um, skimming through here, we see some of the Silicon Valley Panthers as well, number 3, one of the other teams with the Fury that were in that Final Four last season. But you jump to number 7 there, and they got the picture for this week. The Indiana Lions, that's one of the teams we're playing this week. We'll be playing them on Sunday. So the number 7 team in the ABA currently at 16-2. Like I said, they've got a lot of games under their belt this season. Already hit that minimum for the playoff eligibility. And only 2 losses on the season, the second highest ranked team with a loss in the ABA. But that would be an opportunity to knock off the highest ranked team that we faced so far. We played the Fury when they were ranked number 1 twice, came within 10 points of them both times, and we got our first top 10 win not too long ago when we played number 9 Nashville Aces again at the time in that matchup, and we were able to get that victory there. You see, Nashville is still ranked, still a very good team this season. They fell to 15th, so still in that top 15. They really didn't fall too far. But that would be the game on Sunday, an opportunity for us to have our best win against a ranked opponent there. Ohio not ranked this season, but still a very competitive team with a winning record. The other team ranking that I do want to point out here, and one to point out that's no longer on there, but the one that is still on there, the Windy City Inferno at 21. They are at 8-4, and again, we'll point that out because when we look at the standings over on the other screen here in a little bit, the number of wins there does not align with the stats that we have, and I believe some of those are having to do with forfeit cancellations. But it looks like they are 8-4 as far as what we have here on the power rankings. The number 21 team, they are in our division, so a team we always keep an eye on there, and that'll be important when we look at the playoff picture here in a little bit. The exclusion that I wanted to note, a team that has been on there for the vast majority of the season, another team within our division, the Southland Saints, believe this is the first time in a while that they have been left off of that top 25. Um, but we will take a look at the this past weekend's games, and you'll see why that may have happened as far as them falling in that rankings. And let's jump over there and show the games from this past weekend, and that's might explain the update and the rankings here. So we're over on my stats line, and here you go. There is that game from this past weekend, the 25th. A big game within the division there. 118-85 victory. The Chicago Fury over the Southland Saints. So another win against a ranked opponent for the Chicago Fury, but a pretty big loss there for the Southland Saints. So we'll look at this and look at the box score. Um, and Well, it looks like they may not have reported a ton of stats here, but still a pretty big margin there of the victory for the Fury. That is a 33-point victory. And just comparing that to what we've been able to do against the Fury, we were within 10 both times we played them. Saints again, they're technically above us in the rankings because of that schedule and their record so far on the season, being in that winning record there at 7-4. But 33-point victory there for the Chicago Fury. The guy that beat us down low there, Capri Austin. 17 rebounds. Seems like he was doing much of the same there. 12 points. And then it looks like their center, Raji Gallium, also 16 rebounds. So big boards for both of those guys. And then a pretty evenly distributed scoring for the Fury in that matchup. But that game there jumps the Fury out in front. Even another game in the division ranking goes. The other games from this past weekend in the division, the Midwest Monsters traveled on the road to face the Indiana Legends, which that has got to be the most points scored in Legends history. 175 to 127 victory. Legends over the Monsters. Legends are definitely an improved team that we've seen compared to last season. Um, they're not in our division. They're still back in the red division that we competed in last season. But definitely you can see compared to last year, big improvements there for the Legends, and a very large victory there, nearly 50 points. The other game within our division, and this again is important for the standings within the division, Windy City Inferno with a 40-point victory over the Wisconsin Frost. Both of those teams in our division. So important here when it comes to the standings. Inferno, I believe, are now going to jump up to the number 2 spot over the Saints. They also had that victory over the Saints the week prior. So that helped catapult themselves up to that number 2 seed. Believe that is going to drop the Saints down to the number 3 seed. And then the Wisconsin Frost are the team right behind us in the rankings. So we're number 4 currently. And we sit at that 6-6 record. The Wisconsin Frost, I'll have to double check. I can check here and then we'll look at the thing over on the standings tab. But that puts them, it looks like, at 4-7. And that is going to put them a few games behind us because of that. So a little bit of a gap there when it comes to the 1 seed to the 2 seed. The 2 and the 3 seed very close here, and then about a game and a half back would be us, and then about the same distance there from us to the Frost and the Monsters at the bottom of the rankings currently in the division. Then we see the games that were scheduled. We were supposed to play the Blaze there, but that game was canceled. Looks like this game may not have happened either, as far as the St. Louis Spirits against the Chicago Fury. What we got coming up though this weekend, our game here, it's not at 12, it's at 7:30, just as all of our other home games are. That matchup against the Ohio Kings. Wisconsin Frost will play against the Greyhounds. Southland Saints and the Chicago Rebels. But we'll look and take a quick look at these games just to look at the records between these two teams. So Wisconsin Frost 4-7, the Greyhounds 0-2. So be an interesting game to see the outcome. But it looks like the Greyhounds may be one of those part-time teams. The Saints on the road against the Rebels. Believe the Saints are going to have that advantage as they have a 7-4 record compared to a 4-9 record for the Rebels. Um, so they may be able to help kind of get themselves back in the right line with that game. Then we've got the River City Gamblers on the road against the Windy City Inferno. And looking at that, it looks like the Inferno also will have the advantage as far as the record goes, 8-4 compared to 4-6. So big opportunity for both of those teams to kind of solidify themselves in the divisional rankings as we go on the road the following day against the Indiana Lions, a team within the red division but only 2 losses on the season. The Kings believe they have a few more losses, but they are at 6-3, so still a winning record for them as well. Then our other divisional games, we got the this one it looks like was canceled. The game between the Monsters and the Knights, but the Fury will go on the road to play the Shuckers, a team we always like to see as well. Keep tracking of their games. An exhibition team this season in the ABA, but a team that looks to continue to grow and solidify themselves in the ABA here in upcoming seasons. And a team we've played against in all of our preseason matchups before the ABA tip. So that's what we got going on this weekend. We'll take a look back at the past matchup we had against the Ohio Kings earlier this season. And there we go. One of our largest losses as far as margin of victory goes, 131 to 111 victory for the Kings while they were at our home venue. And this will be the same case tomorrow. It is, again, a home game for us. Our only scheduled home game for February. Best Choice Fieldhouse, Fishers, Indiana, 7:30 tip. Um, Wish I was able to go out there, but just will not be able to do that with travel arrangements. But hopefully I'll be out there for one of the other upcoming games. And yeah, so Cameron Mitchell, that was the one I had mentioned. Um, 30 points. That's what we were able to hold him to. He averages about 40 points on the season. And then his brother, Kevin Mitchell, also with 28 points. But those are the two guys you got to watch when it comes to the game. And the offense definitely goes through the Mitchells as far as that goes. Looking at our team, a little bit of a different lineup than what we'll be seeing tomorrow, and we'll touch base on the lineup as far as what I'm aware of at this point. But our leading scorer there, Dylan Ware, with 24 points, 12 rebounds, uh, 4 assists. Don't anticipate him being there for the game tomorrow. And then a couple other guys on here. AB. And I'm not sure if Ant either. So a few guys that won't be there. And actually, Chuck, we do have some news to share with you on that. It looks like Chuck may not be able to play tomorrow's game either, or actually this weekend. So little teaser here. If you're not already on the Patreon, we put up a mid-season or a little bit after mid-season update within uh, actually the past day we did that to give you an update as far as some of the things that you may have noticed for this season, that you may have wanted to know a little bit more information on. Our one of our other co-owners, Frosty, he went on and posted that. It's exclusive to our Patreon members, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll give you some teasers here. He discussed, some of the things that you guys have been wondering as far as roster, schedule, and referees. One of the things he hit on was the fluidity within the rosters. He also noted that uh, one of our key guys, Chuck, that's who I was just mentioning, is going to be out this weekend. He's actually got a rib injury he's been dealing with from a game a past few weeks ago. He actually broke his ribs, so that's a big part of our team that's not going to be there this weekend, and one of the key guys that helped lock down Cameron Mitchell in the last matchup. So definitely keeping my eye on that defensive matchup on our end to see how we're able to adjust against Cameron Mitchell with Chuck not in the lineup for this matchup. But that's one of the things he hit on, as well as the different uh, rosters and lineups we've had throughout the season, the schedule. We've always been transparent on that. The ABA, it is a league that has a lot of teams, and because of that, sometimes we do have to deal with an evolving schedule. Nothing is 100% always set in stone because of certain situations, stuff we can't always control. Last minute cancellations, teams not having enough players, um, and that is something we go into a little bit more detail on. And then we also one of the things that Frosty always loved to talk about is the refs, and he definitely touches on that as well in that post. Again, that's exclusive to Patreon members. So if you're not over on our Patreon, the Apex Athletic Collective Patreon, jump over there and you get to get yourself some exclusive information. And once again we have that full roster, then we can go back and start doing that fans man vote. But obviously injuries and the other situations have limited us as far as doing that throughout the later part of this season. um, and yeah, definitely, Chuck. We got fans out here too that would love to have you back. But we definitely wish you a speedy recovery, and we hope to have you back on the court here soon. But we definitely want to get you rested up and heal up, so you're ready for the playoffs and the Instigators playoff push this season. But yeah, so that's something over on the Patreon. You can check that out, learn a little bit more, and get some more insight from an owner's perspective. And we'll jump back over here and go back, and we'll take a look here at the upcoming schedule, not just for us, but for the other teams in our division here. And actually, we'll take a look at the standings first, and then do that. That way, we can see where the things kind of stand right now within our division, what we're looking at, what we have to see, and ultimately, a playoff push potentially for us to jump to that number 3 seed. That's definitely what we are trying to target. A reminder, it was. Last season it was our first time experiencing this, but with the ABA, you have the play-in weekend right before like the divisional playoff weekend. That play-in weekend is going to be the teams outside of the top three in the division. So the top three teams are going to get themselves locked into that first round of the divisional playoffs, and it'll be the one versus the play-in team, and then the two and the three face off against each other. Winners of those respective games then face off again the next day. But the play in game is going to be a little bit different this season because of how this division is set up compared to the division last season. So there's only 6 teams in the division. With that being said, that's going to lead for a matchup there between the 5 and the 6 seed for the first round of the play in game. That right now would be the Frost versus the Monsters. And then the winner of that matchup would go on to play the number 4 seed, which currently would be us. Winner of that then goes on and plays the number 1 seed, which is pretty much secured up at this point by the Chicago Fury. I don't think there's realistically a chance that they fall off of that number 1 seed. 4-game lead currently. And it, like I said, it's just not realistic to expect them to fall off from that number 1 seed. I think they can pretty much lock themselves into that number 1 seed this weekend if they haven't already. They also have the plus 387, the point differential there. That's a key column to keep an eye on because that is the tiebreaker when it comes to the standings. So if a team has the same record as each other, that is the tiebreaker. But we see number 2. So the Windy City Inferno did jump up to the number 2 seed at 8-4. Again, they're 4 games behind that number 1 seed. But that number 3 seed just behind them, we've got the Southland Saints at 7-4. So a half game behind them. But we look at that point differential, that's going to be the big deciding factor there. So even if the Saints pull off a victory and they get themselves at the same number of games and catch up with the same record, they're still going to be behind the Inferno as far as that standings go, unless they're somehow able to pull off 150 or so point victory to jump themselves up above that. But the other thing to keep in mind there is the Saints are 7-4. They're at 4.5 games behind. We find ourselves at 6-6, so obviously we got some more losses than them right now. But that's a game and a half behind them is what we currently sit at. If we're able to catch ourselves back up and they fall, we would have the advantage as far as the point differential goes right now. So if we can get ourselves into the same record at the end of the season, we actually could jump ourselves into that number 3 spot. So that's our goal, is to jump into that number 3 spot. Obviously, we can't control the futures of the other teams in the division, but we can control our own future. And to do that, obviously, we've got to win as many games on the remainder of the schedule, as tough as that's going to be. Then looking right behind us, a game and a half behind us. So, like I said, we're in that weird middle spot. So the 2 and the 3 seed very close as far as the records go. But then from that 3 and the 4 seed to the 4 and the 5 seed is pretty much like a weird little gap there, a game and a half behind and a game and a half above. So you got the potential for us to jump up and try to get that number 3 seed. But you definitely don't want to start losing games, because then it opens the door up for us to drop and potentially fall to that 5 seed. Definitely not something we don't want to see happen. But there is the possibility of that. The one advantage we do currently have against the Frost, though, is that point differential. But that's what we got looking on. And then the Monsters still looking for their first win on the season. I think that as far as the record goes currently, they've pretty much kind of locked themselves into that bottom seed for the division for this season. But they've got a lot of pride on the line. still trying to get that first win in the first season. We know how that feels, so we definitely know any matchup against them is not going to be a given. Definitely a hungry team on the line, and because of that, that's why we want to find ourselves in the higher seeding to better propel ourselves into a playoff picture. And then obviously, if you jump to that number 3 seed, that gives you a matchup most likely against the Inferno. Um, and I think as far as that goes, the Inferno is definitely going to be a more favorable matchup than the Chicago Fury. If we find ourselves in that 4 seed and we're able to jump into that next round, then that would be our matchup is going to be against the Chicago Fury. So we'd much rather, I think, have that matchup against the Inferno and then play the Fury the next day. But that is what we've got looking on in our division right now. Jump back here to the schedule and see the path that we've got for ourselves here going into the remainder of the season. So we've got obviously the game against the Kings and the Lions. So a potential for 2 games for us. Obviously, if we can get victories in those would be key. Saints are going to be favorited in that matchup. Same with the Inferno in their matchup this weekend. However, the next weekend, we do see the Lions are taking on the Inferno. So that could be another key matchup in the divisional standings. And then the Frost and the Rebels, that should be a pretty close matchup as far as that goes. The following weekend, again, that's going to be the Super Bowl weekend. So I don't think we have anything on the schedule currently for that. But then the following weekend, we are back on the road against the Monsters. That is a game we should be able to win. But again, nothing is a given. So hopefully that can jump ourselves in higher up in those rankings. And then the Saints are going to be favorited in that matchup there against the Wisconsin Frost. Frost, though, again, they're trying to get themselves higher in the rankings. So it'll be a tough game there. Again, Fury pretty much got themselves locked as far as that goes. But the 402 Elite travel to take on the Windy City Inferno. And 402 Elite are a pretty good team as well. So 7-2 currently, and they could definitely find themselves being a tough matchup there um, for the Inferno. Then we've got the following week. It would be again, that's the one we got to get figured out. I don't think we're playing at noon on Friday, but we'll have at least one matchup there. That's going to be a tough matchup regardless of what it is. And then as far as the other games in the division, the Frost and the Monsters. So that's probably a potential game for the Frost there. And then the Saints face the Lions. So a tough matchup there for the Saints. And then the last 2 weeks, it looks like the Saints were scheduled to play the Pitbulls, which again, I don't believe they're going to be playing any more games. So that puts us in a little bit of a pickle there because I think this is going to wind up being awarded a victory then if it is a forfeit for that game there. So one of those 2 games would be a forfeit victory, as far as I'm aware, currently for the Saints. So that'd be an extra game they're going to get at the end of the season, and then we play the Miners there that last week for us. So potentially looking at a couple of tough games there for the Inferno. They're currently 2 games ahead of us, though, so a little bit more work for us to jump up in front of them. They've also got that bigger point differential, but the Saints got kind of like a split schedule. Some easier games and a couple, a harder game towards the end of the season there as well. But that's what we got looking at for the rest of this season. potential there for us to jump up to that number 3 seed. Obviously, that is our goal. And then we'll just take a look again around the league to see some of the other teams that we could potentially be facing in a deep playoff run. Wizards still out in front in their division. Only a half game though. They're at 6-3 right now. And the Yellow Jackets, though, if you see there, they have that point differential advantage. So that's going to be a key matchup there to see who gets out number 1 seed. The Lions, pretty much lock themselves, I would say, up in that number 1 seed in their division. Aces not too far behind, though, with an impressive record for them as well. Kings, again, that's a team we'll be playing. A lot of these teams here in the red division, teams from last season that we played that we still play a few times here in this season. Miners, after a hot start though, at 2-6. The white division, the 402 Elite, the team we just pointed out, look pretty strong there at the top. Then over in the East, you got a pretty good matchup there between the Hoop Dragons and the Jersey Express. Um, both those teams impressive so far. And then this is where you run into those the rankings where it depends on how strict they are when it comes to that 16 game minimum. It looks like both the Kings and 413 Elite are going to hit that. Wolves though are going to have to add some more games to hit that number. But all those teams fighting for that top spot all within a half game. Central PA Kings, a team local to where I am from and grew up, currently leading their division. So I like to see that 9-3 with a game above Philly. But they got to work on that point differential. Philly's got the point differential advantage. And then one of the most competitive divisions, especially at the top end here, the white division in the East, Buffalo Extreme, Binghamton Bulldogs, both undefeated on the season. Binghamton, though, was able to knock the Extreme out of the playoffs last season. So that'll definitely be a key matchup as far as early playoff games. That divisional round for the East White Division, that is going to be a big and challenging weekend for those teams there. Saratoga not too far behind. I mean, they're as far as the number of games behind, they are behind by a decent amount, but impressive record there for them at 9-5 as well. Over in the South, though, we've got a very competitive division here in the Black Division with 9 teams. Gulf Coast Gladiators, so sitting at the top there with an impressive 13-1 record. Only 2 losses, though, for the North Alabama War Dogs. But the team that represented the South in the championship last season, the Mississippi Silverbacks, find themselves in that odd number 5 spot at 8-6. But you see, they're on a 3-game winning streak. The only thing, though, is they still got themselves in the hole when it comes to that point differential. So they're going to have to fight their way into the playoffs, it looks like right now. But still some season left for them to do that. And they're on a hot streak right now. So they may be able to get that pulled off. And then over in the blue division, Austin Bats solidly ahead at the number 1 seed there with an undefeated record of 13-0. And this Alamo City All-Stars not too far off, though, with a 9-2 record. The red division, another one of those very large divisions in the South, with 3 teams at the top with more than 10 wins. 12-1 Skyhawks leading the way, but just behind them is the 12-2 Aliens. Pythons just behind them as well. Chattanooga Strike not too far behind at 9-2. And over in the South White Division, we got the Kiss Me Lambs at 12-1. They find themselves pretty solidly up at the top of that ranking. Over in the West, got a competitive Black Division there as well. Tied for the lead, we got Guy Levy Legends and the Inland Empire Hounds. And then we got in the blue, Tucson Buckets pretty solidly got themselves locked in at number 1. Silicon Valley Panthers still undefeated, number 13-0. I think they're the number 3 team on the power rankings. And then we've got the West White with San Francisco currently at the top. That's what we got around the league. Um, Stop sharing that screen. But that's what we got looking at the playoffs. Not too far out. Once we jump into February, then we got ourselves basically a month until we're into the playoff games, and that's pretty crazy to think. We're winding down on the regular season of our second ABA season. Um, just crazy to think about where we're at so far. The other thing I wanted to point out and just briefly mention is something that ABA also announced is going to be happening for the championship all-star weekend. And we'll share the screen over here. So they just announced that they're going to be hosting a 3-on-3 tournament in April, Saturday, April 5th, in St. Louis, Missouri. Um, and it's going to be in conjunction with the ABA final weekend. The championship weekend held in St. Louis this year is going to be April 4th and 5th. So that is a cool opportunity. We're looking into that. Maybe we'll be a part of that. We had that 3-on-3 tournament hosted by D'Angelo Russell's foundation in the off season. So it wouldn't be our first time launching into the 3-on-3 atmosphere, but a potential here for some eyes on the team in the championship weekend. So it'll be interesting to see. But definitely something that will be discussed. And you see there, Joe Newman, ABA CEO, a guy who's been a special guest on the podcast talking about it. But it's an introduction of ABA 3, which is going to be the ABA's version of 3-on-3 basketball. So not only are we going to have the championship weekend with the games, the All-Star game, the All-Star festivities, we're also going to have a 3-on-3 tournament. So even more fun for the championship weekend here in it's going to be St. Louis, Missouri this year. So we were in Mobile, Alabama last season. They had some pretty cool themed jerseys to the city for that last season. So I'm sure they'll have something themed with the city this season as well. But a little bit earlier in the calendar as far as the championship weekend goes, and I think it was the weekend of the 20th last year is when we had the championship. So a couple weeks earlier, but that also means we got playoffs coming up earlier. We started the season earlier, and once we jump into March, I mean that's really playoff time because we got ourselves a whole month once we have March to jump into the championship. But that would be, yeah, I mean, that realistically is going to be a lot of games. Maybe not too many breaks there. Going into March, you got the play in weekend, then you got the play off divisional weekend, then you got the regional weekend, and then you're going to have, obviously the championship weekend. So really not much break as once we hit that end of the season, end of our regular season here. But a cool opportunity, I think, at least for the ABA to jump into that 3-on-3 tournament and 3-on-3 atmosphere. Something we've seen that is very popular and draws a lot of views, and hopefully that draws more traffic into the All-Star and Championship weekend here for this season of the ABA. hopefully though, as much as I'd love for us to be in that 3-on-3 tournament, hopefully we're not playing in that and we're playing in the championship instead. But that was just something I wanted to share as far as the ABA making that announcement this week. So something cool they got coming up, something I'm looking forward to. And maybe I'd like to go to championship weekend again. Um, but last season I was the one representative as far as the ownership group that was able to make it out to Mobile. But maybe this one's a little bit closer. We'll have some more guys out there representing the team. And then last season we had AB in the All-Star game, so hopefully we can add that and have another player in the All-Star game this season. And or like I said, if we're in the championship game, then I'm fine with that as well. I'd actually prefer that than having the All Star, the 3-on-3 tournament. But those are some good alternatives just in case as well. But that's what we got coming up here in the future, the next couple of months. Tomorrow, though, this weekend, we got two big games this weekend. Tomorrow at home, our only home game scheduled for the month of February against the Ohio Kings. Still looking for our first win against them. That's going to be fun. A fun matchup there. As always, lots of scoring when we face against the Kings. And again, 7:30 tip. That'll be streaming live here on Patreon for all of those subscribers at the paid tier. You can watch that game live on Patreon. And then we've got the game on Sunday on the road. We'll be going against the Indiana Lions, our only game scheduled for this season, and it was a late addition to the schedule against the Indiana Lions. But definitely bragging rights on the table for the state of Indiana when it comes to this matchup. We've got the victory over the Shuckers. We got a victory over the Legends. The only team in the state we don't have a victory over this season yet is the Lions. So definitely bragging rights on the table there for that matchup. But that is going to be a tough matchup as always. The number 7 team currently in the power rankings in the ABA. And I believe that's going to be a 4 p.m. tip Eastern time on Sunday. Not 100% sure if that one's going to be streamed live here, or I do know the Lions also do wind up broadcasting their games. So it may be one of those situations where it's the blackout for the live, but then we can put it up the day after or so. I think that happened earlier this year with the game against the Wizards. So maybe a situation like that. But the game tomorrow we'll definitely be having here live on the Patreon. And then we'll make an announcement when it comes to the Lions game on Sunday as well. But that's going to be it for tonight's episode. Thank you as always for joining me on Instigate Success, building an ABA franchise. It's been episode 76. We're counting down to 100, getting close to that mark here. But that is it for tonight. Catch both of those games this weekend. Big games this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. Our first doubleheader ever in the ABA as far as the weekend goes, a doubleheader weekend outside of the playoffs or the play-in tournament from last season. But thank you for joining me. We'll be here, as always, streaming Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be on Patreon as well as Twitch for the official Hoosier State Instigators podcast. But until next time, as always, be great and instigate.